In 1986, Capcom released the first Resident Evil game to massive critical success. With it, the survival horror genre was invented, as it actually coined that name. Now, 30 years later, we are getting what is meant to be the final numbered Resident Evil game in the form of Resident Evil Requiem. And because we're getting that, I decided to go back and play through that one. Weirdly enough, this is one of the rare times that the vast majority of the fanbase for a classic game prefers the remake. It's often expected that there will always be a loud group shouting that the remake can never reach the peak of the original, but it's a different story with this remake. Part of that could be because of how close together the releases of the remake and the original were. It was largely the same team, with Shinji Mikami returning to direct. The remake also aimed only to enhance the experience of the original, which included adding a modernized movement system that could be used in place of the classic tank controls, which were made available to those who wanted to use them. Other changes in the remake include, but are not limited to, enhanced graphics, new animated cutscenes to replace the old live-action ones, and even a new subplot with its own boss battles. Because the changes in the remake are fairly limited, it's no surprise how much the community adores this remake. It's actually a primary goal to make sure that these veteran fans would be willing to play this remake. Many of the changes they made to the game were solely in service to these fans. So this remake in 2002 was highly acclaimed. Review scores at the time for it were mostly in the 90s, with a few dipping into the 80s. Actually, looking at Metacritic, there's only one non-positive review from a now unavailable publication that seemed to have the primary complaint that, while it looked great, it wasn't all that different from the original. However, that was all in 2002. So how is it that 24 years later, this game is still phenomenal? Even if you ignore the additional graphical upgrade the game got in 2015, the game still feels good. Hell, it's one of the best survival horror games I've ever played. And there were even moments when it didn't even feel as if it was multiple decades old. This is especially true for the visuals. I think a big one of the reasons that this game still works is that it's just genuinely beautiful. Many people struggle to get past the weird camera of the game, and I will admit there were times that I found the camera to be my greatest adversary since I used the modernized controls. None of that is a problem with tank controls, but oh well. It's because of the forced perspective style, which was done out of necessity, that we are able to get the sort of intentional shots that gaming is often lacking, as it gives the developers the ability to really control the composition of the scene we are playing through. While this separates us from the character we play as more than if we were to have full control over the camera, this separation creates so much more suspense for us as players, which is incredibly important for horror. Because we are no longer able to see what the character sees, the developers of the game are afforded more control over when a moment is suspenseful. This is something that is not solely true of Resident Evil, as plenty of other games adopted this style of camera, even translating it into different genres. Resident Evil is also not the first game to use forced perspective, as the game to do this was Alone in the Dark. Rather, Resident Evil is considered to have been the one to have perfected this formula, or at least been the most successful game to do it. I really do like the forced perspective style, and I wish more games were brave enough to do it now, since some of my favorite games were made entirely in forced perspective or utilized it in some form. It seems developers are scared to try because it might feel too dated for the casual gamer to want to play it at all, and they're not entirely wrong. Outside of most gaming circles, the general population is now off-put by this style of game that used to be fairly normal, but I think they should take the leap either way. The sheer amount of creativity that it affords developers is rarely matched. Other than the visuals though, the gameplay is not neglected. While the combat is often clunky and simple, this minor bit of clunkiness adds a level of tension to the early parts of the game while you get used to the mechanics. However, combat is not where Resident Evil nor many other survival horror games shines. If you've never played a survival horror game, you might be surprised to find out that alongside the horror and atmosphere that these games have, they often shine in their exploration and puzzle solving. In fact, the exploration itself is part of the puzzle solving in a good survival horror. In this first Resident Evil, there are no inventory expansions that are commonplace in the more recent games. You get 8 slots to pick from, or if you pick Chris, which I did, only 6. Multiple times while playing, I found myself plotting out my path, making sure to pass by a safe room to store unneeded items, or to grab the ones necessary to complete a puzzle I just figured out the solution to. Outside of inventory management, figuring out the safest path to where you need to go is just as important, since you may want to avoid lingering zombies, or you don't want to risk crossing past a zombie who's been dead long enough to mutate into a Crimson Head. Oh, holy! Oh my god! It's also less as important as the exploration itself, but I personally love the system of changing the color of a room on the map to indicate that it has been cleaned of all items. There's a sense of satisfaction when you manage to clear everything you possibly can clear before moving on to the next area. And once you reach the end of the game, you're able to flip through the map and see that it's been picked clean to your satisfaction. This is a detail that the more recent remakes have kept to, other than Resident Evil 4 Remake. Everything about this game, from the camera angles, to the layout of the map, to the actual puzzles that don't involve exploration, feels intentional. There's this sense of passion and direction that the game has that so many games today are sadly lacking. Maybe that's why this game still works. That 22 years later, you can still feel the ambitions of the team that worked on it. That you can feel how much they want you to love the game. Just a side note, but my all-time favorite aspect of Resident Evil games that isn't unique to this one at all is how the games start off really scary and aim to freak you out, but once you start nearing the end of the game, it shifts more over to action once you've gotten used to the fact that the scary monsters still die after being domed 3 times by a 12 gauge. This first one still manages to keep up most of the horror throughout for much longer than the others, but even it isn't safe from that simple truth. Oh, wait, I can kill these things?
Rebecca.